Soviet pilot Mikhail Petrovich Devyataev was captured after his aircraft was shot down during World War II and sent to a labor camp next to Rocket Center Peenemunde, where the famous V-2 rockets were being developed. With the help of his fellow countrymen, Devyataev executed a masterful escape that involved stealing a Heinkel He bomber from the prison's commander. The small team of Soviet survivors then managed to fly into Russian territory after evading Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters, but their troubles were far from over. The soldiers were shot down by Soviet aircraft, deemed traitors by Stalin's police, and sent to the front line to keep fighting. But Devyataev would continue to prove his worth and was eventually recognized as a hero of the Soviet Union thanks to valuable information he shared with the head of the Soviet space program. A dream come true. Mikhail Petrovich Devyataev was born in 1917 in a small Moldovan village in Torbayevo, Russia. He was the 13th child of a hard-working peasant family. Mikhail was known to be a mediocre student. He showed little interest in school and didn't have any hobbies. But it all changed when he saw an aircraft for the first time. The warplane landed on his village, and when a Soviet pilot emerged from it, Mikhail raced to him and asked, quote, "How do I become a pilot?" The man smiled and said, quote, "It is necessary to study well, practice sports, and be extremely brave." Mikhail then became an excellent student and sportsman. In 1933, after finishing 7th grade, he traveled to Kazan to join the aviation school, but a paperwork mistake placed him in River College. Still, Mikhail joined the Flying Club of Kazan. He would go to River School in the mornings and train to become a pilot by night. The young man graduated from River College in 1938 and briefly worked as the captain of a barge on the Volga. After saving some money, Mikhail then enrolled in the Orenburg Aviation School to become a military pilot, where he met veteran aviators from the Spanish Civil War. By the summer of 1939, Mikhail successfully graduated as a Red Army pilot. A survivor. Devyataev scored his first German bomber kill on June 24, 1941, in the outskirts of Minsk. His bravery earned him the Order of the Red Banner, and he became the leader of the 104th Guards Fighter Aviation Regiment. His call sign was Mordvin. As the German offensives turned more aggressive, Devyataev was repeatedly summoned to defend Moscow from Luftwaffe bombers. Piloting brand new Yakovlev fighters, Devyataev and his unit were sent to Tula to knock down a Junker bombers formation. They managed to take out some of them, but Devyataev was hit during the raid. The pilot managed to land his Yakovlev, but was injured in one leg and sent to the hospital. Once recovered, he immediately went back to his unit and continued flying. On September 21, 1941, Devyataev was shot down again after delivering a secret package to a Soviet army encircled by the Wehrmacht. Although Devyataev survived the encounter against a squad of Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters with severe leg injuries, the medics forbade him from flying fighters ever again. He was only cleared to fly low-speed aircraft, including night bombers or air ambulances. He then became part of a night bomber regiment. Months later, Devyataev was transferred to a fighter squadron led by Soviet aces Vladimir Bovrov and Alexander Pokrishkin. On July 13, 1944, the pilot was downed over the skies of Lviv after dogfighting with German aircraft. Bovrov himself asked him to jump out of his burning aircraft. Devyataev then parachuted into the unknown, and his epic journey into captivity was about to begin. Captivity. Devyataev hit his aircraft while parachuting and was knocked unconscious. When he woke up hours later, he was a prisoner of war under German custody. The Soviet pilot was stripped of his clothes and interrogated by German soldiers before being sent to the Lodz prison camp, where he stayed for over a month. On August 13, 1944, Devyataev attempted to escape with other Soviets through a tunnel, but they were caught, beaten, and sent to the infamous Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Devyataev soon realized that Soviet pilots were treated with extreme brutality by the German guards and the Gestapo officers. Consequently, Devyataev and other pilots exchanged identities with deceased infantrymen. The pilot was shortly transferred to a third concentration camp in Usedom Island, where the Wehrmacht was secretly testing V-2 rockets, the world's first ballistic missiles. The Rocket Center Peenemunde began operating in 1937. Since the outbreak of the war, tens of thousands of prisoners from concentration camps were relocated there to help develop the V-2 program. These rockets were envisioned by designer Wernher von Braun, who would later become the head of NASA and help the Americans win the space race. They were also one of Hitler's wonder weapons. Over 15,000 German personnel had worked at Peenemunde, but the research center was heavily bombed by British Royal Air Force bombers in August of 1943, killing hundreds of specialists. Consequently, the workload for prisoners of war intensified to reach the program's deadlines. Devyataev found himself in Camp Karlshagen, which was near Peenemunde's missile center. Conditions were inhumane, and most prisoners perished slowly from famine. The prisoners' tasks involved neutralizing unexploded Allied bombs and repairing runways and infrastructure due to bombings. On one occasion, Devyataev saw how a group of prisoners lost their lives after a bomb detonated when they approached. The pilot knew it was only a matter of time before he suffered the same fate or starved to death. He preferred to risk his life by fleeing than merely staying still. By January 1945, he had befriended 10 Soviet prisoners willing to escape with him. It was believed that the only way out of the camp was through the sea, but Devyataev's eyes aimed at the sky. The Great Escape. After assembling the team, Devyataev ordered total secrecy. He had witnessed traitors among the prisoners trying to convince others to join the fight against the Soviet Union, as Stalin's policy of no retreat and surrender would condemn them either way. But Devyataev and his companions believed they had a better chance of surviving under the Red Army. The pilot convinced the team that the only way to escape was through the sky. They would need to break into the nearby airfield and steal a German aircraft bomber. The first step was to contact the Soviet team that worked in the airfield to get information about the German guards and the aircraft stationed there. A Heinkel He-111 bomber was chosen, as it could fit the 10 prisoners. The problem was that the sole Heinkel belonged to the base's commander. In addition, Devyataev did not know how to fly bombers, so they needed to gather as much information as possible related to the aircraft. In his book, Escape from Hell, Devyataev would later write, quote, "I began to study the details of severely damaged aircraft, although there was a risk of being shot. Often we were instructed to clean up the wreckage of the aircraft. During this work, I tore off the dashboard's different plates, hid them in pockets in a kettle, and when I returned to the barracks, I tried to figure out what was what. I studied the purpose of the instruments." At noon on February 8, 1945, the team got ready to storm into the airfield. Ivan Krovanigov picked up a crowbar and got rid of the guard at the entrance. Kutergin, another prisoner, stripped the guard of his uniform and put it on. He then led the team to the airfield, pretending they would do some cleaning. Once there, Devyataev ran towards the bomber. But when he tried to turn the engines on, he realized there were no batteries. The remaining team found a cart with batteries minutes later, but the Germans spotted them, and Devyataev started the engines right away. The prisoners then jumped in as quickly as possible. Some guards blocked the runway and began shooting their KAR-98 rifles, while others ran for the anti-aircraft guns. Devyataev accelerated with all his might, and the Heinkel flew over the enemy barricade as it took off. Once in the air, Devyataev heard aircraft approaching. German Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters were after them. He then climbed as much as he could, while the other men figured out how to handle the aircraft's armament. Devyataev ventured into huge, dense clouds in an effort to evade the enemy fighters, and it worked. He then turned eastward. After flying for over 400 kilometers, they were stricken by fire from Red Army anti-aircraft guns. The men were relieved to have reached friendly territory, but terrified of being shot down by the AA guns. Devyataev then landed the aircraft on snowy terrain while the men cheered. They had survived. Hero of the Soviet Union. The survivors were surrounded by members of the 61st Soviet Army. Devyataev wrote in his book that, quote, "The soldiers took us in their arms and carried us. They threw jackets and sweaters on our shoulders. However, when NKVD officers arrived, they took the 10 men away for interrogation. They were convinced they were traitors and did not believe their story. The NKVD then sent them to a penal military unit. 5 of them perished before the war ended." Devyataev survived, but carried the mark of a criminal for over a decade. He eventually managed to get a job at Kazan and briefly assisted Sergei Korolev with crucial information he learned about the V-2 program, which ultimately paved the way for the Russian space program. In 1957, at Korolev's request, Devyataev was recognized as a hero of the Soviet Union and awarded many titles for his actions as a pilot and as a war veteran. His escape remains one of the most impressive survival stories of World War II. Thank you for watching my video. Please like and subscribe to watch more fascinating historical content, and let us know in the comments below about other topics of your interest.